So recently, President Trump attacked a Democratic candidate. This is Minnesota Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar. Now, you might not have heard of her, or you might have heard of her. It doesn't really matter to talk about her all that much, except that she just announced her intention to run for president in 2020. Again, I think most of you are like, who? Well, anyway, when she was giving that announcement, she was giving it in Minnesota, of course, in the middle of winter. And so the president pointed out, oh, look at how snowy it is in Minnesota. Where's your global warming now? In fact, she said in her speech that she was going to have the U.S. rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement, something Donald Trump pulled out of, as well as support a Green New Deal. Well, that's great. That's fantastic. I'm massively in favor of the Green New Deal. But Trump couldn't help himself, and he attacked her on the false premise that because there is snow, because it is snowing, well, climate change must not exist. He said, "It happened again. Amy Klobuchar announced that she is running for president, talking proudly of how fighting global warming while standing in a virtual blizzard of snow, ice, and freezing temperatures. Bad timing. By the end of her speech, she looked like a snowman woman." Ridiculous, right? But this is somebody who was too stupid to understand that climate and weather are different. And he doesn't understand that you can have a warming planet and still actually have snow. I know, it's a strange concept. But let me tell you what NASA says. NASA is a government agency in the Trump administration. They say, weather is what conditions are of the atmosphere are over a short period of time. And climate is how the atmosphere behaves over relatively long periods of time. So there is a difference here. It is a time difference. And what is going on with the climate over, long periods of time? I mean, look, if you want to talk long periods of geologic time, well, you're talking hundreds of millions of years, right? We're going a little bit more short term, right? Say over the last 200 years or so. Well, the last 5 hottest years on record that we have since we started measuring global temperatures were 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018. The last 5 hottest years on record. I wonder if that says something about the, climate. And look, 2019 is likely going to be even warmer on record, and it's not just in one geographic area, but it's all over the planet, worldwide. So while it might be snowing in Minnesota in the middle of freaking winter, duh, but in Australia, there is record heat. And it does not mean that climate change, that global warming isn't real. And look, when summer comes around in the United States, there will likely be record hot temperatures like we have seen last year. So spare me this whole thing. This is what climate change does. It makes the extremes more extreme and makes those extremes happen more often. Like, for example, let me give you that, talk about that polar vortex, right? Now, I'm in the Midwest. We just had a polar vortex, right? It was last week, right? So the reason that we had one is because, at least this is a theory, how what they're saying, and that scientists, right? They're saying that that polar vortex was caused by the warming climate, which disrupted some of the polar winds that kept that cold Arctic air in place, right? So without those winds keeping it in place, because of that disrupted climate, the jet stream, you had that polar vortex drift down into the United States. And so taking that polar air with it. And as the planet warms, there are more disruptions like that should be expected. But Donald Trump's an idiot. He's not a smart person. He's not a stable genius. And there is no changing his mind. As one of his advisors had said, once he's made up his mind on what he believes the facts are, nothing's going to change his mind. He believes what he believes. Which sounds a lot like the Fox News audience, by the way. And look, he once even claimed that climate change was nothing more than a Chinese hoax invented to hurt the United States. What a ridiculous belief. You have 99% of the world's scientists that agree that climate change is real and that the driver to the rate of climate change being so high is human activity. Again, climate has always changed, right? You always hear that argument from right-wingers. And in that respect, yes, climate has always changed, but particularly slowly. It changes very slowly. The problem is, since the Industrial Revolution, it has been changing much more rapidly, which is very problematic. So, the problem with that is that it's less time for plants and animals and human beings to be able to adapt. We are part of a cycle. We're part of nature, right? We depend on plants and animals for food. And what's the problem here with climate change and a warming planet is that they're not going to be able to adapt quickly enough to the warming of the atmosphere and the oceans too. And if they can adapt and they die out, what happens to the people that depend on them? What happens to the industries that depend on them? No, our entire way of life will end up collapsing. And so that's a real problem. That's why we have to do something on climate change. It's about making sure our way of life does not fall apart because we depend on so many different things. Now, Klobuchar, of course, responded to this by saying that science supported her policies. Quote, "Science is on my side." Well, okay, generally I agree with that, except for the fact, and I know I'm going to get a little nitpicky here, but in reality, science isn't on anyone's side. Science is simply facts, right? Or they find facts. And what does Ben Shapiro say all the time? Facts don't care about your feelings. And if you're dismissing climate change because you just don't feel like it's real, well then, for one, you're doing oil company propaganda, fossil fuel company propaganda, and you're helping rich people get super rich that aren't going to be around long enough to be able to feel the effects of climate change. So they don't care. They're like, what am I going to care in 2100? I'm going to be dead. I'm going to be dead before 2150 or 2050, but I'm going to make all this money in the meantime, so who cares? I don't care about your kids. I don't care about your grandkids. I don't even care about my own, except that they're going to have billions of dollars. So they'll be fine. But your kids, whatever, don't care. And two, you seem to be okay with the destruction of society. Because unchecked, the reality is climate change will eventually destroy our way of life. And we need to do something about it to mitigate that before it happens. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent, progressive media.